Sorry, Tony.
You know I wouldn't do this if I had any other choice. But he's my friend. So was I.
When legislation is conceived that would put further checks on the Avengers and make them more accountable to the world as a whole for their actions, disagreements arise within the ranks of the Avengers, splitting them into two different factions, Iron Man leading the faction that is in favor of the legislation, and Captain America leading the side against it. The good. Seeing the Avengers fight each other or have disagreements and whatnot is nothing new for the cinematic universe. However, it is the first time that the Avengers have been on opposite sides of a conflict with each other. Naturally, a situation like that would create a lot of emotional turmoil for the characters, and it is done very well in this movie. The level of emotional conflict is made so intense because of the bonds that these characters have shared over the course of several Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. And the actors playing these characters give performances with an intensity to match. If you've kept up with the cinematic universe, then most of the characters in this movie are going to be familiar to you. And I think that's a very good thing, because that means there are very few characters in this film that need to be introduced to the audiences and new things that need to be established, and that it's mostly going off of material that the audience is already familiar with. So in a storytelling sense, we can just dive right in, already be familiar with these characters, and to devote more story time for developing the characters and letting them go through their character arcs. The action scenes in this movie are also pretty great. If you're a fan of the who would win in a fight, this hero or this hero who theoretically would probably never fight each other, this is a good movie to go into to test those kinds of theories. At this point, there's a wide variety of superheroes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and every action scene makes really good use of what they can do. Two characters that do get an introduction in Civil War are Black Panther and Spider-Man. Keeping in mind the parts they have to play in this particular story, I think these characters were introduced very well. In a limited amount of screen time, the basic essential information about each of these characters is delivered to us, such as who they are and what they're about. And after having them appear in Civil War, I'm really looking forward to watching their solo movies. In general, I really like the way this plot unfolded. It begins with an event that kickstarts the plot, continues to escalate throughout the runtime of the whole movie, and teases the audience with an air of mystery throughout the runtime, slowly revealing itself as the plot progresses. The iffy. At this stage in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there are now 12 films prior to Captain America Civil War that you need to catch up on. Give or take a couple that might not be important, it is highly recommended that you have seen most of those movies in order to truly understand the depths of the conflict that is happening in this movie. Movies where multiple characters in this universe come together are the payoff that Marvel has been promising us by developing this big, vast universe of superheroes. And if you keep up with the movies, then that payoff is something that is very well worth it. This movie is crowded with a lot of major Marvel Universe characters, so naturally, some characters are going to get more focus than others. And despite the fact that this movie is the longest Marvel movie thus far, the sad truth is that not every character can have their chance to shine to their fullest extent. And as a consequence of this, there are characters whose story arcs feel weaker by comparison to some of the more major characters, and it might feel somewhat dissatisfying to fans of these characters. With that said, every character does get at least a few moments to shine throughout the runtime of this movie. The story of this film makes use of a secondary antagonist. I did like the way he was used in the story, and he was done effectively enough to the fact that I hated this villain and I wanted to see him beaten. That being said, this character just was not very interesting. And to a further degree, the original Civil War storyline loses some of the bite that it had because of the role that this character plays in this story. The bad. Some of the action scenes, especially during the beginning, use tightly framed shaky camera shots. While it's not done in such a nauseating fashion that makes it impossible to see what's going on, I did feel myself wanting for the camera to be a little more steady during these parts. The verdict? Captain America Civil War builds off the movies that came before it very well, is highly emotionally engaging, and changes the status quo of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is Detective Steve. And I'd tell Zack Snyder to take notes, but I think it's a little late for that.